So then how exactly did the coastline, what is we know as our coastline now, become Kenya's, and then Zanzibar remain?
Oh, all right.
Yes.
Yes, we jumped there a
Mm,
bit. Let's go back to the negotiations for independence,
mm,
because every country was negotiating for its interests,
mm,
and the British were also looking at what will happen to their interests that they had. So during our negotiations,
mm,
Kenya's negotiations,
mm,
the main forum at that time was the Lancaster House Conference. There was a series of these conferences. The first one, which included on Kenyan side political leaders and people of influence, delegations. Of course, it was selected by the governor, and they went to Lancaster. That Lancaster House is there. It's a big building in London. In fact, near Buckingham Palace, not very far. And it is both a conference center and a palace. So that Lancaster Palace offered the venue for the series of conferences that Kenya was having with the British to plan the future, the constitutional arrangement. What are we going to do? Who is going to take what sort of power structure is going to be set up? So there was the first Lancaster House Conference, and the African people had their demands, which they placed. African people, I'm talking about the African leaders, didn't go as united. Just like you see politicians today, they look after different interests. The same thing, it's not new. So you had, and then the British are also playing divide and rule among the Africans, like they have done throughout the years. It's not a strange thing. So they also playing divide and rule among the Africans, using some of the Africans to protect their future interests in the country. So it was a very difficult situation to get. So there was the first Lancaster House Conference. It achieved something, but not everything. Then the second Lancaster House Conference. And during all this progress was being made, and then they agreed on an African majority rule. That was the first principle, that Kenya would be run a majority African rule. And that majority would be obtained through elections. Elections are done through political parties. And you see, political parties were banned earlier by the same British because they didn't want Africans to participate in political activity. So you had to develop these things from zero. The only strong organization that was the labor movement.
mm,
At that time, it was called the Kenya Federation of Labor. They had tolerated the labor movement, and it was one of the strongest organizations that could be relied on. And then the political parties came. There was a Kenya African Union, which had been banned, and then it was allowed back. And then you see there were political leaders in detention. So the African delegation was demanding, we can't go to the conference, and we are our leader, you detained them. So we want them outside. So during the first, and I think the second, Kenyatta was not among the leaders because he had not been released. So all these negotiations were going on, give and take, very difficult because the British didn't want to give everything. And then the Africans were literally demanding everything.
mm,
And then there was hope. They didn't even know what hope, what does independence mean? What are the implications of us ruling ourselves? What are we doing? What shall we do with the independence? You see, all these questions were coming. And it's not like today, the age of internet, where, information is so plentiful everywhere. And then you see the limited education, the British had restricted access to higher education so that the Africans could not get into. So the delegations were not very highly equipped in a proper way to sit like they would today, because today's world. So you can appreciate that they tried very, very hard to get whatever you got at independence. So the Constitutional Conference, Lancaster 1, Lancaster 2, Lancaster 3. And during when Kenyatta was released and he joined, I think 90s, because he was released initially from detention in 1961, August. And then they told him, look, you can't go home. He was in prison in Kapenguri. I'm sorry, in Logtown in Turkana. And then he came to Lodwar. And then they said, you can't go to Nairobi, you have to be restricted. So when he was released, he was taken to Mara in Samburu County under restriction. In August 1981, people are going to see him in Mara because he couldn't come to Khartoum or even Nairobi.
Why not?
They were freedom.
So he was freed but not freed.
He was under what we call house arrest. Yes.
The same thing they did to Mandela.
Yeah, you've seen the way the stages of him even. Yeah, people could go to see him in prison, but he couldn't come out. And then they sent him somewhere else for slowly, and then finally he was released. So that happened because the demand, these people were saying, we can't negotiate with you. Our leaders cannot. What do you want us to say? What, I'm not the one that leader. So the delegation worked very hard to have Kenyatta and others released and to join them. So finally, Kenyatta joined the delegation. And then it was time to talk about the constitutional arrangement for the future independent Kenya. And the question arose, and they said, we can't have a country landlocked today when we have a historical access to the sea, as far as we remember. So it was a very big sticking point. And that territory of the 10 Coastal Strip had belonged to the Sultan. He was claiming it as part of Zanzibar. So it was a very delicate and difficult negotiation. And finally, the Sultan of Zanzibar was persuaded to release this part. And he said, yes, it's okay, let it be part of Kenya. And that was one of the most difficult points during the negotiations of independence. And it was resolved like that. And Kenya said, we are not taking independence as a landlocked country. So we insisted. And the Sultan was Sweden. So the Sultan remained with the Zanzibar Island, Pemba, and